Hello, it's Good Friday, and Good Friday in the Christian calendar and Holy Week is a very special day. It's very important for us to pause and think about what actually transpired on the original Good Friday. But first, I'd like you to imagine yourself in a beautiful natural garden. And then I want you to think about what it would be like in the Garden of Gethsemane 2,000 years ago. It's not a tailored garden where everything is just pristine or for a bunch of tourists. It's going to be more rustic. The Garden of Gethsemane would be a place where Jesus and his disciples gathered and met. And it would have to be rustic, kind of like where we are today with the trees and the environment. But it was also somewhat tailored because it was a special garden. And you would have like an archway and a gate and a fence and olive trees. We like to think about gardens in our culture as being places for food. And while that's true, in many parts of the world, gardens have trees, whether it's fruit trees or in the Middle East, especially olive trees around the Mediterranean in the garden. But they would have food, but they would also have flowers. And it would be a place of beauty and rest and a place to get away from Jerusalem. But that's also why it may seem strange that Jesus went with his disciples after the Last Supper to a garden, because that's where his passion started. That's where the suffering really started. He spent time with his disciples there, and he was in prayer, and he was in anguished prayer. But his disciples fell asleep. And that was part of his passion. That was part of the abandonment that was going on, because they didn't get it. They didn't understand. And then in this meeting place, this place of life, this place of renewed growth, this place for food, seems so strange to be a place where the passion would start. And then Judas came and showed up because he knew the place, because that's where Jesus met with his disciples on other occasions. And so this becomes a difficult thing if you think about it. It isn't just an issue about getting away, because if it were a thing of God trying to create this situation where Jesus were betrayed, he could have been ambushed in the streets of Jerusalem after they left the Last Supper, after they left the Passover meal. He could have been ambushed in a place much more suitable for evil, like in the Kidron Valley. But no, it was in a place of peace, a place of getting away, a place of separation. That's where his passion started. And yeah, Good Friday, we think about it where, he's being accused, he had his mock trial, he had the terrible floggings and the abuse that he suffered from the hands of the Romans after he had been abandoned by his own people. But the Romans wouldn't have done this if he hadn't been abandoned by the Jews, because the Jews didn't have the authority to kill somebody. The Romans kept that for themselves in all of their territories. And so here we see that Jesus suffered and died, but it all started in the garden. It all started in a place of peace and growth. And if we think about it, maybe that's a good place for us to start this story of Good Friday and the suffering that went on, because it kind of gives that contrast. It was a total abandonment. Jesus suffered everything in a total abandonment. He was betrayed. It started at a place that was for him and his disciples in a good place, but then it went totally bad from there. At the same time, the garden reminds us that if we lay down our lives, if we separate ourselves from our selfishness and our sin, and we put our faith in Jesus, that we have a new life. We can have that new growth. We can have that renewed life. All of those things that the devil meant for destruction and bad and for our evil, all of those things can be replaced by new life and growth. Right now, the birds are chirping. I hear a cow in the background. I've seen butterflies out here, and the iris are growing, and all the native trees are coming out in bloom, and there's new life. And that's what happens at Easter. It's new life. It really, yeah, it was necessary for Jesus to suffer and die, but the objective was to give us new life. And so in Galatians it says, "For through the law I died to the law, so that I might live to God. I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. I do not nullify the grace of God, for if righteousness were through the law, then Christ died for no purpose. But Christ died for a purpose. He came to this earth. The Bible says that Jesus came to undo the works of the devil. The ultimate undoing of the works of the devil was the suffering, dying, but then rising again from the dead and coming out of the grave on Easter morning. So on Good Friday, let's remember all of those things. But one thing that's tied up with that is communion. The reason why we take communion is at the Last Supper, Jesus said, "Do this in remembrance of him." That was the Last Supper. But it's tied to the Passion. It's tied to Good Friday. It really is, because Jesus said, this blood, the blood that was shed through his suffering and his death, is the blood of the new covenant that was foretold by Jeremiah. And so Jesus took that time that the devil meant for evil and bad, and the devil thought he was going to win, but God had the victory. That's part of the paradox of our faith. The things that seem so bad sometimes turn out to be the things that are so good and so good for us. So until Sunday, remember what Jesus did for us, and pause here on Good Friday and think about what Jesus did for each and every one of us.